Welcome to On the Issues with Michelle Goodwin at Ms. Magazine. As you know, we report, rebel, and we tell it just like it is. On our show, we center your concerns about rebuilding America, about expressing equality for all people. We examine the past as we think about the future. And in this episode, I couldn't be more pleased than to be joined by a live studio audience. And with me is Lizz Winstead. You know her as the co-creator and head writer of Comedy Central's The Daily Show, where she forever changed the way that people get their news. She's also the founder and chief creative officer of Abortion Access Front, and truly one of the world's leading top political satirists, working anywhere across the globe today. We're in Washington, D.C. with a live studio audience. Sit back and take a listen. Liz, what was the impetus for your dive into this space, which you've always been committed to, but so many people recognized you first as a comedian, the co-creator of The Daily Show, as being that kind of voice, and many would say, oh, this is just so radically different. Drop the pearls, to do this work. Or clutch them, yes. Yes, clutch the pearls.
I think, well, I would say it would be more radical if I was just a comedian who was like, so my husband, or that kind of comedian. Yes. But because politics was in my blood and I wanted to do comedy that had a purpose, the one thing that sadly was true was in the Daily Show work, in the Air America work, even in the stand-up work, when it came to abortion, it was systems of patriarchy, even in places that we like, really exist, right? And so I was like, are men going to care about that? Like, do we want to do a story about that? I was like, yeah, me too.
Were you concerned that in doing this work that it might, that some of your audience might say, I'm not interested in hearing that?
You know what? If I had the luxury of an audience caring about what women thought, that would be a consideration. But the thing that I really realized was standing on stage as a woman or somebody who's just not a cis white guy is something you have to take. No one's saying, what we need is more women of color and women just taking up space and giving their opinions and running things. No one's saying that. And so I would just get on stage and tell some bullshit jokes, and people were like, how dare you be up there? And I was like, well, if you're going to be mad I'm here, I might as well say something to get you actually mad. Yes. And then that would make the most sense. So what I thought was, this is going to be harder, but if I'm out there saying things, there's an audience that didn't know people were saying things, so let's find them. Let's weed out the people that don't want me there and bring in the people that want that conversation to be started. All right, so you had a sense of what was going on before so many. And when I think about the work that I was doing 25 years ago is, on IVF and women being criminalized and dragged out of hospitals in shackles and chains, the attention paid to that was very limited by people who didn't see it as central to the cause of abortion, right? Reproductive rights was really just right and about abortion. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about pregnancy. It wasn't about maternal mortality, maternal morbidity, and any of those things. But we met at an AF conference that was... No, we met at Netroots.
Was it Netroots?
Yes, in Minneapolis.
Okay, that's right. But it was a long time ago. I mean, it was way, way before Dobbs.
Yes, way, way before I was doing this.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. Right. So why were you there and thinking about this stuff?
I'm just nosy. I was there because I was doing politics, and I was kind of a generalist, and I cared about everything. But also, whiteness is something when it doesn't have to occur to you, it doesn't occur to you, right? And so within it, I realized that if I got to tell my abortion story a lot. And that abortion story is the one that everybody knows, and it's not the one that's should be centered all the time. But also I realized that I got to have my abortions, plural, and then I got to walk away and do my life. And then when I realized I did this wild thing when Wendy Davis was on the steps with the sneakers and I was in Minnesota, I told some of you the story earlier. I did some research and found out that there was all these other cities that were passing the states that were passing these kind of laws.
Right.
So I got in a van with my dogs and I drove around the country raising money and visiting clinics. And I found out what clinics needed and what was at stake. And I found out there was a hole in the movement. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways I can say is don't replicate the work that good people are doing. Like if you find work that no one's doing, like there's not a bunch of comics walking around being like, I can gather 300 people in a room and do a show. And through the course of that show, I can center the providers in that town and the activists in that town so that the town comes to the comedy show, but also learns about how they can get involved with the people doing the real work. And a lot of times for my audience, which was, I'm going to say 75% white folks, to hear from leadership of Black and brown women for the first time on stage, and for them to be excited to take that leadership was something I could offer. Like I can be the pack mule for a lot of people doing really good work. And so I just wanted to expand that. So I got back to Brooklyn really quickly, got a bunch of comics together, said, I know you've had abortions. Why don't we do something to preserve this for everybody so that everybody can get on their path to destiny? And let's do it. And that's kind of what happened.
But it's interesting because that makes me also think about Renee's work in storytelling, which became very prominent. And Renee Bracy Sherman is with us, everybody, because we are podcasting right now. And the storytelling brief before the United States Supreme Court and the Dobbs decision is incredibly powerful. And she was very insistent about it centering voices of Black and brown folks, which was not necessarily what everybody was on board with, but she really had to push on that. So as I think about you pushing others to tell their stories, that was also a pre-Dobbs time when people weren't thinking about sharing because of humiliation, the way that people can be humiliated, the ways in which people can be made to feel guilty. So did you get support from within the comedian community, if that's a thing, right away? Yeah.
I got buy-in from a lot of people at first, and then some people were scared because, you know, you're told that your career will be ruined. And I said, well, like I hate that phrase, like seat at the table, because we didn't build that table. People don't want to sit at that table. Like smash that table. Maybe this is the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it was the same thing where I said, look, take me as an example. Before I started this, I've been on stage for 2 years publicly talking about abortion. I'm getting jobs. Nothing happened to me. So nothing will happen to you. Like nothing's gonna happen to you.
Heads won't explode.
So so to be able to work as an example first, to show people you don't have to be afraid was really important to me. So then when we joined in, you just got more fans and people realize, oh my God, I'm getting more things. I'm telling my abortion story and doing comedy, and people are asking me to do one-person shows in my theater around these experiences and things like that. So it was really good to be able to lead the way and to also do it as an older person with zero fucks to give was really nice, to be able to create this massive pathway where I could just say, just come on, it's good because I'm going to peace out and then you all are going to be at the forefront. So it's really nice. So yes, they did join, and I think, they did.
So picking up on that, there's a documentary that was trailing you through some of that. Can you tell us a little bit about this documentary, which is coming to theaters near you all?
Yeah. So we had a documentary crew following us for 7 years. Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh. Bye. My family, who really doesn't understand that I work on Sundays. Can you have lunch now? It's a documentary called No One Asked You, and it follows us on the road. And really, it was a real gift to have somebody follow and trail and tell the story, not only of the work we do, which we have various programmatic things that are awesome, but to also show that as one organization, we can't do everything. And part of our mission, which I really love, is that when people come to us and say, here's what I like to do, if that's not our wheelhouse, we can give them to Renee, or we can give them to a whole host of other organizations that they might not know about. Our media is terrible at talking about this, and when they do talk about it, they have just ceded the conversation to the right for 40 years. So the language they have is bad, it's stigmatizing, it's terrible. And so, through the documentary, we have this really nice media outlet that tells the story of how people can help. And then through our podcast, we tell people every week the biggest stories in the news, and then feature people like Amy, people like Michelle as our go-to legal person, so that folks can hear that. I love seeing you on MSNBC, but I don't love seeing you for 3.5 minutes interrupted by somebody who is not an expert in the field. But you know what I mean? Like, that is just real. Like, hey, we're going to have some weird generalist from the Lincoln Project and Michelle. What's happening right now? What is happening? Right? So to be able to have a long form conversation and then have calls to action, tell people what to do, drive them to our activist calendar, all that stuff is, I just want people to not say, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't feel seen. My abilities are limited. My income is limited. I want them to know that we can get you someplace where you can find community. And if that's with us, sometimes the community might just be communing with us, and we'll get you to the place where you can do the activism. Sometimes the activism we do is where you can connect with.
Well, one part of this activism has been, you all have been shining a camera quite literally in the faces of people who've been disruptors, who've been aggressive, who've been assaulters, who've committed assault against people who are trying to get the health care that they need. And I'd love it if you'd share a bit about how this somehow got you entangled with the FBI and January 6th.
Yes. So through our touring, we go to a town for 2 or 3 days, because not only do we do shows where we highlight the providers, we also do work at the clinics. We might fix their fences or do their lawns or
put in a prickly bush.
Yeah. We do a lot of stuff that clinics can't get. And then we also create community with the escort programs and the abortion funds and all those people. And they all were telling us in these relationships about their local anti-abortion terrorists at their clinics. They knew their names. So we'd be like in Mississippi, and they'd be like, this guy, and here's his name, and here's what he did. Then we'd go to Montgomery, Alabama, and they go, we got this local guy, and they would say the same name as this person. So I was like, wait, you all think that these people are local, they're traveling around, is anybody creating a database? And they were like, database, we're volunteer escorts. And I was like, that is fair, okay. So we decided to collect all of the information from all of these places. And we ended up accidentally, as this band of people, creating one of the largest databases in our movement about anti-abortion extremism, where they live, what they do. We join their churches under pseudonyms online, track them online. And so they reveal a lot about who they are and where they're going to be.
They don't hide it anymore.
They don't hide it
not as if they ever really did.
Right, as if they ever really did. But they would say, we're having a training to do a clinic blockade. And it's like, A, that's a federal offense. B, thank you. So we would attend either in person, or we would screenshot it and get all the footage in the film. And then in the middle of December, they started talking about going to the Stop the Steal rally. So we assigned people to follow each of these accounts and do all this stuff. And they started assembling, and they started posting, and we started grabbing.
And they were very explicit about what they planned to do.
Yes.
On January 6th.
Exactly. So the morning
they
of
weren't hiding it.
No,
I want to insurrect. Yes. Let me take over the government. Let me.
I know. We coined the term ginsurrection about Ginny Thomas, and I really feel like she's a ginsurrectionist, so if we could all just start using that in our daily lives, I would appreciate it. So the morning of January 6th, we were like, hey, they all are rumbling, they're going to go. let's everybody just monitor what's happening. Maybe something will happen. Like, we didn't know it was going to become that.
Right, like, because maybe they're just, it's puffery.
Yeah, because so much of that shit, 6 people show up and say signs and they don't tread on me. It's like nobody wants to. So thank God that we had this infrastructure in place, because they all showed up and we all saw what happened. And we grabbed all of their footage and we reported 30 of them to the FBI. And we just recently,
doesn't that deserve
right. And that's through our footage. For those of you who have seen the film, through our footage of them doing these blockades at clinics, our data and our footage got it's like up to 17, I think, people arrested and charged on face charges, which are federal violations that come with the possibility of an 11-year fine, 11-year prison sentence, $250,000 fine, and one of them is a physician who might lose his license. So,
who shows up at clinics with his children and
a bullhorn? He brings a whole sound system and then plays like little children saying, "Mommy, no," like at the clinic. He brings all of his adopted children. He's like this creepy dude who's adopted all these children of color. It's like a mess. So we like to take on the anti-abortion movement, not only just expose them, but it's always an and. Like, clowning with people who are terrorists is not the way to go. Bringing people up, showing America who they are, and then telling people how they can help continue that conversation, and then also get them arrested. Yes, please. That is a good plan, I think.
So, last couple questions, and opening it up for any questions that you all have.
And the question can't be, when are we eating?
Where were you when the Dobbs decision came down? Do you remember the moment in which you heard the Supreme Court's ruling in that decision?
It's wild. I had to go pick up my dog because he bit the groomer. So I'm at the groomers and they're like, "Your dog bit me." And then some other woman was like, "He actually just bit at the clippers." And I was like, "I'm not here to have a fight." And then my phone starts blowing up. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, "Can you get your dog out of here?" And I'm trying to get my dog out of here. And then I'm seeing Dobbs. So I'm walking in Brooklyn, and I just went on Facebook Live, and I feel like every single time something has happened, I've been in some weird, inconvenient public place where I just start bursting out crying, and then I find it compelling to go on live on Instagram. Mildly inarticulate. So, but it was like, I think part of that is, and I'm sure Amy and Renee, you can relate to this. It's so, every time a big thing happens in our movement that like affects all of us, I get terrified about the media telling the story first because they tell it so badly. You get one chance, right? And so it's like, God, I'm just this nobody with a little bit of a platform, and I just want to make sure that at least it's out there. And I know we all feel the same way, right? So that was that. And as we have all talked about, the second they decided to take the case, well, even before that, but the second they decided to take the case, we all knew, and our hearts bled for all of it. We all knew what it was.
If you listen to the oral arguments.
And just like literally, can't you just drop babies off at Blockbuster or whatever she was saying? Like, it was just,
Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett. And just like, we all know. And just right in a decision. And now we should revisit the Burgerfell. And now we should revisit birth control. And now, it's like, we just need to revisit all the ways that we can oppress everybody in this room and people who are walking around with uteruses. Like, now we finally just have carte blanche, and it feels really scary. And so now we were like, well, we have to do something. And when people were so surprised and like, I don't know what to do, we kicked into high gear and teamed up with Renee and RJ leaders and people who did abortion provision and people who do direct action and people who fund and procedures and practical support. And we did this day-long marathon live stream that 10,000 people watched. And then we broke it up into sections of how you could do activism with workbooks. And 10,000 more people have watched it since then. And that's where the intersections of all of our work are crucial to come together to say, this person is who you need to go to for this. this person is who you need to go to for this. If you're confused by the end of this, call us and we'll make sure you get to where you need to go. And so I think that's the biggest value maybe that we can provide in our movement.
Wow. I want to open it up for any questions that you all might have. I mean, very recently, the Alabama Supreme Court has issued a decision that is rife with biblical references and scorn and thunderclouds and all of that.
And deciding human beings can live in a vat at 320 below Fahrenheit, but I digress.
Exactly, that embryos have the status of children, which is a post-Dobbs reality and also a pre-Dobbs reality of the state of Alabama being committed to the criminal prosecution of women in that state, and a case prior to this actually heard by that Supreme Court saying that they see no difference between a 12-year-old and a fetus and no difference between a viable fetus and a non-viable fetus just a few years before Dobbs, and this is affecting many. So questions for Liz or comments for Liz. I'm so grateful for this audience that we have here. Mark Joseph Stern, who shares my heart and who I'm always happy to share a platform and stage
And
with.
I'm so excited to meet you.
You two have never met before?
No.
Okay.
Diane keeps you away from us. But I am grateful.
Absolutely grateful. We all are, Mark, for your amazing work. All right. Any comments, questions? Yes.
Just a question. So I walked in and to the space and sat next to Renee, and I wasn't familiar with Renee's work. But I turned to her and I said, "What do you think about storytelling in the abortion?"
Oh my God! Look at that! Talk about synergy.
But I was asking because we tell, I categorize the good stories, the bad stories, the okay stories, and so I'm just wondering, Liz, how you disentangle labeling a story and giving space for every story as having value and equity and a chance to change the movement. And Jill and I have talked about my experience, and I thank you for holding space for that with no judgment. But I wonder
And if we can repeat it slightly.
Sure. So the question is, how do we really tell the stories? I think honoring all stories, right?
Yes.
My whole thing since the beginning has been stigmatizing and demonizing anyone's abortion story and putting them into buckets does a disservice to everyone. The other big thing that we stress is we need to live and work towards a country that values all pregnancy outcomes, full stop, right? And so if you're a 16-year-old whose values say, I'm pregnant, I'm low income, but my value is I want a parent, that we provide that space and those resources for that person. Conversely,
and keep them alive
and
during
keep them
the
alive
process,
during
and
the
keep their
process.
and keep their children alive after they are born
100%.
and when they become children
That
and
is
teenagers.
That is the entire
Yes.
place we need to be. And conversely, if there's a 35-year-old who's parenting 2 kids, cannot have another, has made that decision for themselves, honoring that, right? And so that is the narrative we seeded. We somehow took abortion, and I say we, I mean me, we white women who were in charge of all of this narrative.
Sitting on millions and millions of dollars in endowment dollars, just saying.
Yeah, set this narrative of how are we going to get people to tolerate abortion? Because that was what we were and tolerating teen mothers. And all of this stuff, I will say something, I don't know if it's radical in this room or whatever. I believe that the way we talk about birth control is racist in this country. We will honor 19 and pregnant on the TLC channel, and Catholics, aren't they wonderful? The Catholics have 6 kids. But if low-income people who are black and brown want to have 6 kids, we don't honor that.
Oh, they don't get to have 2 kids.
They don't get to have that, or a TV show, or any other shit, right? So
I don't even know if they really get to have sex.
Right,
Exactly.
Get back to work.
Exactly.
Right.
So for me, it's just super important that abortion is a community good, a moral good. I often parrot Amy and in the language that you use, and also valuing where people come from is a moral good, and parenting is a moral. All of it is good, right? And so making sure that we say that a lot. Yes. And I am in a lot of spaces where there's a lot of women who have resources, who are white, who when I say that they're uncomfortable, and I'm happy to. That's my job, is to have those uncomfortable conversations. And at the end of the day, I don't know how they're going to feel. I hope I'm compelling with it, but at least they have heard it from, and so they can't go back to their circles and still have their biases of how they talk. So if I can be helpful, that's just part of what I firmly believe. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Wonderful question.
Yeah, really good.
Others.
I have a follow-up to that, because you mentioned how the discourse around birth control is racist, right? What else, or in what other ways have you confronted the anti-Blackness within the reproductive rights movement? Right?
So, I mean,
and we're going to repeat the question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So how do we address anti-Blackness within our movement? Mm-hmm. And I like that you said within our movement instead of always blaming the right-wing people who hate us. We expect that, right? But the anti-Blackness, first of all, it's foundational, so it comes all the time. That's what we learn. And the silence around, how do we really feel about these people? How come this person is having their abortion at 25 weeks? You know, how did they get to that? The fact that we need to talk circumstantially all the time about how anti-Blackness plays a role in access, because that is really it, right? Anti-Blackness is
the leadership too, right?
Yes.
And then that's become complicated as well, right? So in part, it's been leadership over time who had access to the steering wheel, right? And to the gas pump to put the gas in, that automobile, and where other people were situated.
Yes.
I remember giving a talk for an anniversary for an organization, and mentioning, just because I thought it was important to mention that within this organization, it was really important to not have internal glass ceilings where women of color couldn't reach up. Over the next 2 days, so many women of color coming to me who were part of that organization, crying and saying, thank you so much for mentioning that, because that's been my experience. That's been our experience. And I said it because I thought it was important to say.
Yes.
And the reality was that was exactly what was being lived for so many women of color who were within those organizations. But of course, now there's also the flip. And one sees this interestingly in academia too, right? Now, like after crisis, let's find women of color. But that also comes with its own kind of trickery.
Yes. Well, also I want to say, like, creating a space, and I try to do this in my work. Like, I feel like I know I'm doing well in making sure that the Black and brown women in my organization are heard, is when, and Nicole said this to me, Nicole's somebody Renee, I go, we got a knockdown drag out fight. Knockdown drag out. And she said at the end of the day, this is the first time I didn't feel like I was gonna get fired fighting with a Black woman. I mean, a white woman, like my boss. And I was like, and that's I don't even understand. My whiteness doesn't even allow me to think like that is the lived experience of Black women who go to work. But like, to be able to have an actual, like, what are we fucking doing? It's like, I don't know what we're doing. Like, to really have that conversation, it's literally about what are we doing, not having any kind of competency or adequacy or your job is threatened. It's like, we're mad at each other right now. So let's just be mad at each other right now. And then that was a hit in the face for me of like, how do I need to reevaluate leadership? Was this an accident on my part? Was this intentional on my part? I didn't know the answer to that, but I want to examine those things for myself. So like all of this, anti-Blackness is at the root of all of it. And so and especially the barriers, right? Because those barriers are, as we have people working at the cross sections of environmental justice and reproductive justice, all of these things that come together it's people just want compact shit, and nothing's compact. The complexities of how we have set up systems for people to thrive It's all terrible, and it's never ever helped anybody who doesn't look like me. And sometimes people like me aren't even on that train, right? So I think really recognizing that and working with Black-led organizations so they can say, like, when I first started this, I did not understand the framework of reproductive justice. I didn't understand it completely. And Renee didn't call me out, called me in and said, hey, if you're going to be doing this, your framing needs to be this. And I was like, thank you for not like trying to make me look like an asshole.
Rossi, you know.
Yeah,
yes.
but 100%. I mean, you remember. And so, and she's still here, so I think I was listening to her. But like, you know, but I think those things are real. And the thing I will just button this with is the thing as white women we can't do or shouldn't do, I believe, is be super mad and try to get ally cookies in public at other white women, because if we do that, you know who then the labor falls to? Y'all, right? So to like talk to them, do that, and then like talk to your
that's you know what, that's another podcast, that like little pearls that she just dropped right there, that sort of let's pick up some cookies by demeaning somebody else to make it seem
and
like
it's like all
more,
you're doing then is like,
know.
look at, aren't I great? I just made that person feel like shit. It's like that person that feels like shit is now going to go find a person of color and say, I don't know what I did. And then the exact thing happens that we don't want to happen is that Black people have to explain their existence.
And it's
in the world.
performative too.
Yes, it's bullshit.
I
I mean, I literally, I don't have any tolerance. I have very little tolerance for a lot of that. And I try not to, you would think I would be like one of those people that's like online trying to, and I just am not.
I have one more question for you, but I wonder if anyone else might, and it's about Justice Thomas. But yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
but you know, I am an expert, a scholar.
Well,
on JT.
Right, exactly. Well, you know what? I have a JT story. So when this one, we'll just call him now JT.
JT. Not even his first name.
Right? Yeah. No. When our daughter was about 7 or 8 years old, and I took her to hear Supreme Court arguments, which, by the way, was a date in which Justice Breyer read her and about 10, 15 other kids The Cat in the Hat, and he had the Cat in the hat on, and all the kids. It was really sweet. It was really great. But before that, during oral arguments, she tapped me and she asked me, "Mommy, why is the Black judge asleep?" Because he looked asleep. He did. That was the era of I ask no questions and I look incredibly bored while I'm sitting here. And right, so
I'm good.
You're right. So, but the JT question is one of Dobbs, and it's one of now in Alabama, which is that in his concurring opinion, he basically said, and everything else related to privacy should be scorched earth. Except interracial marriage, right? So,
but you know, I have a theory about that. Are you sure?
Well, you know,
because I feel like he's going to throw interracial marriage in the mix because she's so terrifying. He doesn't know how to divorce her. So he may have to just abolish interracial marriage to get rid of her ass. Like it's voluntary, but it might. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but I feel like. Are you going to get fired? No, not at all. But that does raise issues in terms of post-Dobbs now and everything else that's affected. I mean, it's really what is more than for podcast upon podcast upon, but any sense of what's next? I mean, what I hope is next is that we take this opportunity to also remind people that Roe was the very bottom and it didn't service a lot of people. So as we rebuild and decide we want to have this movement, that we're going to actually have true bodily autonomy and reproductive emancipation, that is going to be a thing that we are going to say.
That includes everybody, right? Like the next Reconstruction as being foundational to the rights of people who are LGBTQIA, people of color, everybody has space within the tent.
Exactly. And so that is it. I think that helping people learn that ballot initiatives are helpful, not enough. Like how, and also that as we are navigating this landscape of hopefully resecuring and expanding our rights to the full ways we want to live reproductive lives, that we are wholly understanding that we are responsible along the way for making sure that care is given, that clinics can exist, that people can learn how to self-manage their own abortions. Because as these legal battles are happening, people are still needing care, abortion care, child care, living in healthy environments, and all of the things that have to do that. Like, that's just maintenance that we need to do while we're fighting this larger battle. So getting people involved in doing that, I think, that's where my next go is. And so I'm hoping that people want to like get on the get-go train.
Well, with that, Lizz Winstead, everybody, round of applause.
Guests and listeners, that's it for today's episode of On the Issues with Michelle Goodwin at Ms. Magazine. I want to thank each of you for tuning in for the full story and engaging with us. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode, where you know we'll be reporting, rebelling, and telling it just like it is. For more information about what we discussed today, head to MsMagazine.com and be sure to subscribe. And if you believe, as we do, that women's voices matter, that equality for all persons cannot be delayed, and that rebuilding America and being unbought and unbossed and reclaiming our time are important, then be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to On the Issues with Michelle Goodwin at Ms. Magazine in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever it is that you receive your podcast. We are ad-free and reader-supported. Help us reach new listeners by bringing this hard-hitting content in which you've come to expect and rely upon by subscribing. Let us know what you think about our show, and please support independent feminist media. Look for us at MsMagazine.com for new content and special episode updates. And if you want to reach us, please do so. Email us at ontheissues@MsMagazine.com. We do read our mail. This has been your host, Michelle Goodwin, reporting, rebelling, and telling it just like it is. On the Issues with Michelle Goodwin is a Ms. Magazine joint production. Michelle Goodwin and Kathy Spiller are our executive producers. Our producers for this episode are Roxy Zoll, Oliver Hogg, and also Allison Whelan. Our social media content producer is Sophia Panagrahi. The creative vision behind our work includes art and design by Brandy Phipps, editing by Natalie Holland, and music by Chris J. Lee.